Hello and welcome back to my RC channel. I'm Andy RC and today's video is going to be a little bit different. Here I have the RTF version of the Emax TinyHawk. Now I'm going to be reviewing it at a later date, but not this one. You see, I've been flying for over 25 years and back then you couldn't just walk into a shop and buy something like this or get it online because, well, first of all, brushless Cinewhoops didn't exist, and if you had the internet it was slow, and I'm pretty sure online RC hobby shops didn't exist either. Now, I was interested in planes from seeing the movie Short Circuit 2, I think it was. So I saved up my pocket money, which was 1 GBP a week, and I bought a huge nitro plane out of the classified ads in the newspaper. Do you remember them? And I thought I could just go and fly it on the field outside, but it became pretty clear that there wasn't enough space, and without any instruction it would just pile into the ground and be very dangerous. So you had to join a club because there was no YouTube video telling you how to fly or how to even get anything working. There were no safe electric planes with GPS or stabilizers, and there were no simulators. Anyways, to cut a long story short, when you joined a club, there was kind of an unwritten rule that someone would teach you how to fly using something called a buddy box, which was like a dual control system, kind of like how driving instructors have here in the UK. And it still exists today. That's what the trainer port is. So if the student gets into trouble, then the instructor could take control and rescue your investment. And then once you were proficient, you would then become an instructor yourself and train someone else up. Now, the club that I joined had a lot of instructors. The problem I noticed, though, is that some of the instructors, to be diplomatic about it, would not always save your model when it got into trouble. And me being very young and not having any money, I was very interested in keeping the model in one piece. And there was one pilot who I identified as exceptional, and his name is Phill, and he would get your model back safe, but not only that, he'd get the best out of you as well, and he'd very rarely have incidents with his own models, so I'd wait for him specifically to teach me, and he gave me a lot of his time. Anyways, a few years later that club closed down and I gave up on the whole plane thing for a while just because of the danger aspect, and I guess I started to work and then there were relationships and things like that. But recently at an RC event I saw him and he's still flying, and that's how I ended up at the indoor sports hall. But he's still flying just planes, so I gave him a go of my TinyHawk and I think he liked it. Now, if I had it my way, I'd love to be able to give every single one of you guys who subscribe to this channel a model, because anybody who has to listen to me should be rewarded. And I do giveaways on the channel, and that is the best I can do. But I want to give this to Phill as kind of a thank you because he never asked anything off me, and secondly, he's a big part of why I'm able to have a channel like this in the first place. I also thought it would be a good opportunity to get a perspective from him on this kit, because that's who it's aimed at, somebody who is new to quadcopters. There is just one slight problem though. The kit comes with a transmitter, but it's only available in mode 2, and in our area mode 2 was very rare. In fact, I only ever saw heli guys flying mode 2, and it wasn't often you saw someone turn up with a heli either. So I'm going to have to go old school here and convert this sucker to mode 1, which isn't going to be easy because from the feel of the sticks, they are Xbox style pots which are soldered direct to the board. Now, I've done a tutorial on how to do this in the past and it's not fun, but let's go and do it anyways. So the first thing we need to do is remove the screw and the 18650 battery. Unfortunately, there is a screw, but there are 2 other screws underneath that which we need to remove. Then of course I need to remove the rest of the screws as well, and then it should come apart very carefully. However, if you pull it apart in this way, the button will fall out to turn it on. It's not a problem, you can just slot it back in, just make sure that you don't lose it. Then I'm removing the plastic sticks because they're going to get very hot as we're desoldering and we don't want those to melt. Then there are 3 screws holding the circuit board in, which I thought was a bit strange because there are more holes for more screws, but there are just 3. So I'm just unscrewing those, and then I'm removing the JST connectors for the switches. You don't really need to do that, but it gives you a bit of extra length because this part comes off here, but I don't want to remove the antenna because it's got some adhesive on there, and I'm removing the power connector, which I think is a PH2 connector as well. So now I'm mixing my own solder with their solder because quite often they use unleaded solder, which takes more to heat up and melt and can be difficult for the solder sucker. So I'm mixing my solder in with theirs and doing the same with the other side as well. And the solder sucker just has a pump in it. You put it over the pad and it just heats up the solder and sucks it all up. It's absolutely fantastic, and I use this a lot when I was reviewing the toy models, of course. Then you very carefully remove the pots, and that's what it looks like. And same for the other side as well. So again, very carefully remove the pots. Then I'm putting the throttle over the other side and making sure that it fits flush. And then same with the pitch and the yaw, because this is going to be mode 1. So making sure those are really flush there, and then I'm just going to solder all of those pads back up. So I'll just speed that up for you so you don't have to watch it in slow motion. And of course we need to make sure that I do both sides. So now I'm plugging in the switches. Very important to remember to do so, and also the power connector on the back, and then this part just clips in there on the top, and then the 3 screws have got to go back into the board, and of course the plastic sticks which just slot on. So that's both of those going on. And then to put it back together, I did it upside down so the button doesn't come out. That's the power button. Then what we need to do is put the screws back in. So the 2 screws underneath the battery. And then put the 18650 battery in. Sadly it does need a screw, as I say, but what can you do? You can charge it from the USB connector. Now, if you've watched my previous video on how to convert any toy grade transmitter to any mode, you will have noticed that I would bend some of the pins up on the pots, and I'd have to physically connect wires to them to the other side, and that is because we didn't have Beta Flight, and of course in Beta Flight we can just remap the controls. So I've got the TinyHawk connected to the computer, so I can just click connect, and if I go into the receiver tab and I've got the transmitter on, what I will find is that throttle is pitch because it's set up as AETR, so that's aileron, elevator, throttle and rudder. Now the only difference between mode 1 and mode 2 is the elevator and the throttle. So all I need to do is go in here and just switch them around. So I go A, T, E, R, and then if I press save it should stop spinning, and now throttle is throttle and also pitch is pitch. So that's just really easy, and some of you may have been watching me remove the pots and thinking, why aren't you redirecting any of the signal wires? So the signal wire is the one in the middle in the pot, and I think on my original video I bent up all of the pins, but you don't need to do that because the middle is always signal, and you can test that with a multimeter as well anyways, but back then I didn't know that. So a couple of other things that I have changed, because as I say, Phill has had a play around with my TinyHawk, is I have copied my angle and horizon and also the rates so that it is similar to how mine is set up, so it's not going to be a shock to him when he flies this thing, although the controller is very different because he's always been used to a Spectrum radio, so it's going to be interesting to see how he gets on with that. But that is how to change this transmitter to a different mode, and it's very easy to do the remapping part. So next, let's get and surprise Phill. Right, Phill, got a present for you here, mate. So this is the RTF version of the Emax TinyHawk that you've been flying of mine. It's a little bit awkward actually to get the package out because it's got stuff on both sides. So we've got the brushless quadcopter that you've been flying. Then we've got the goggles. We've got the transmitter, which I've converted to mode 1. And we've got some spare propellers. We've got the battery for the goggles because it's a separate battery. And we've got a charger in there. Now it only comes with one battery. Now I've bought some extra batteries for you, but they haven't turned up yet. So these are my batteries which I've charged. So do you fancy a bash?
Sounds like a plan, mate.
Awesome. So I suggest that because this controller is so different from the Spectrum controller that you've been flying, that you fly it line of sight first. So the controls are pretty simple. So 3-position switch here. So that arms it, and then we've got this here which is stability mode, which is what you've been flying mine in, and then we've got horizon mode, which is stability mode again, but if you go to the edge of the stick it'll do a flip, and then we have got no stability mode whatsoever on the last setting. Also in the middle there as well, we've got a lost model alarm so that it'll beep if you've lost it in long grass or something like that. Right, so to turn it on, it's a long press of this button in the middle here. And then what should happen is it should get a green light. Right, so yeah.
Yeah, small, faint, yeah.
Yeah, very faint light on the TX. And then, so if we put this down on here. So, middle position, we should get beeping from it. In order to arm it, throttle has to be right at the bottom, and then you see we're moving and we're ready to go. So over to you. So how's it on the throttle compared to the Spectrum? Is it a little bit more sensitive because it's
a little bit more friction on my stick?
Yes.
But this allows for maybe a little bit more subtle control. But you'd have to get used to it because it responds quite well.
Yeah. So it's got the same rates and everything.
Yeah, it feels similar, it's just the sticks.
Yeah.
Very different.
Yeah, that's the issue I was worried about with the RTF version. But of course the good thing is that it will bind up with something like a Tyrannus. Look at this, flying like a pro anyways.
And this is total flight time for me of about 17 minutes. I have no idea what I'm doing. Just listening to Andy and hoping for the best.
When
the RC airplane skills I've got don't really translate. You've got to really think about what you're doing.
Yeah, and one thing I didn't mention as well is you've flown collective pitch Halleys, but when you did that, you flew them mode 2. And I've suggested sticking to mode 1 because out of all of the years that I've flown these things, I could never fly mode 2 better than mode 1. I've just been flying mode 1 for so long. Well, looks like you've cracked it to me.
No, I am sweating.
Yeah, I always recommend line of sight first. I know there are some people out there that can't fly line of sight, but I think if regulations get really tight and it comes to the point where you have to take a test, then you're gonna have to do line of sight, I think. Look at that, absolutely perfect and disarmed. FPV next. So arm, yeah, all the way back, throttle up, just take it steady. Might find it drifting a little bit more, just because of the transmitter being different. And just have a fly around. So don't worry about your battery voltage and stuff, because I can shout that out to you. Look at that, straight through a gap, showing off.
No, just getting lost.
You're not lost. Oh, very close to the bar there. So what do you feel about the goggles, like compared to when you were having to go to the Fat Shark? So
I think I'd have to tweak these goggles in some way, because I'm getting almost double vision. I'm having to strain to see clearly, but I think that's more my eyesight than anything else.
No, actually box goggles are known for that, because your eyes are closer to the screen, so essentially you are kind of straining your eyes almost because you're very close to the screen. That's why we've got the Fresnel lens. But I think what you were saying is, did you say you were getting it slightly blurred?
I've got that slightly blur thing going on, but it's like you're trying to look at something too close. And it's almost like double vision, you know, you've got to
but did you say you sort of need kind of reading glasses when things are up close to you?
Oh, close, yeah, proper close.
Yeah, so that's what that'll be, you see. Yeah. Whereas something like the Fat Shark goggles, or there's a series called the Onway goggles with diopters, because you're also far-sighted as well as near-sighted, I think you said. You say you need glasses for driving distance. So you would need that with the Onways and the Fat Sharks as well. But yeah, that's interesting. But for me, you see, I don't need reading glasses. So when I flew them the first time, just for a short time, should I say, then I wasn't getting any blurriness and I wasn't getting any eye strain either. But if you need reading glasses, then you may get eye strain, and I think that's what you're experiencing. So you see the battery flashing at 3.2. We should be fine going down to 3 volts with this one. You're going to try and land on the poo bin. Have you got no power? Ah, there you go. You may have run out of power. No, it's still going. This one, because it's got a bigger capacity battery, it stays above 3 volts, whereas some of the smaller ones, they don't, so they instantly drop below 3 volts. So even though we've got that thing flashing, we can change the settings. So we're at 3 volts now. You'll probably find at some point you'll lose power. Probably there.
Yeah, we'll keep it safe there in one piece.
So there you go. I think that was really interesting to get a different perspective from somebody who is fairly new to quadcopters, but also has a different set of eyes to myself as well. There are a couple of things I want to touch on. So the DVR footage that you were looking at was actually being recorded by my Fat Shark goggles with the TrueD Diversity module. The Emax goggles don't have a built-in DVR, and there was quite a lot of breakup. However, when we were looking through the Emax goggles and the Fat Sharks, there was no breakup whatsoever. So I don't know if there is an issue with the DVR on the Fat Sharks, or maybe it's something to do with the firmware on the True D diversity system, but we were not seeing that amount of breakup. Secondly, you might have noticed that I lifted up the on-screen display, and that is because the Emax goggles slightly miss the bottom of the image off, and you can't read the on-screen display. So I lifted that up for Phill, and it didn't seem to be a problem. And when I first put the goggles on, the first thing that I noticed was, first of all, how loud the fan was, and also how much air it actually blows into your eyes. It almost feels like it's drying your eyes. But Phill didn't notice that. And of course, in a noisy environment like the indoor sports hall, you can't hear the fan going anyways. And as I say, I'll be doing my own independent review of this package. You can take the goggles apart and disconnect that fan. I believe it's just on a JST connector. It's unusual to need a fan on box goggles because I find that they tend to not fog up, but I'll have to see whether it becomes an issue for me when I try and fly with them. By the way, Phill has already gone out and bought a X9D Tyrannus, so I think I've got him, guys. And by the end of the day, I didn't catch it on video, but he was actually flying in acro mode. So this is probably about his 4th flight with a quadcopter, so I think that is pretty incredible. So on that note, I'm going to leave you with some more of Phil's handiwork, and there's kind of a let's drone out in joke in some of this footage, so it might not make any sense, but as you all know, on my field there is a dog poo bin, and it's Phill that built that and made it fly, so enjoy. And as always, thanks so much for watching. Please continue to subscribe. Cheers. This isn't usually how I see them putting the in the bin, Phill.
No, what you want is, just as he drops the tip, get the motor on the bin, spin round, spread to weight.
Jack, we're trying to do a dirty thunderstorm for you.
Needs a bit of weight in it.
It's got weight in it. It's full of
Come here.
Thank you.